What do you have to lose right now? I just think people are scared to fail.
Being able to understand what it means to have to wait, to be patient.
You're listening to the Yash and Company podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Chalasani, or otherwise known as Yash, and you are listening to the Yash and Company podcast. As many of y'all know, this is a show where we learn from the world's best 20 and 30-year-olds. By this, I'm talking about people on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, or as we have on today's show, former NFL quarterback and Baylor legend Bryce Petty. And before we get started with today's episode, I just want to say thank you for supporting everything that we do here at Yash and Company. For those that have seen the intro, you know that this podcast was started because I wanted to answer two pretty simple questions. Those are, one, how do I become a better person tomorrow than I was today? And two is, how do I continue to make this world a better place than I found it? And that is what has led me on this journey. So if you want to join me on this journey, I encourage you to go to yashandco.com and subscribe today. Here, you'll be able to see the things that I've learned from the show's guests and just one or two things that I picked up as I go through my own journey myself. And when you subscribe, you'll also get a free Yash and Company sticker shipped right to your door. So if you like what you hear, go to yashandco.com and subscribe today. So if you know me, you know that I am obsessed with Four Sigmatic coffee. This stuff is hands down the best coffee I've ever had, and I personally am a big fan of their mushroom coffee that comes with lion mane and chaga. I've been using this product for the past year now, and I typically only take about half a serving. That's because this stuff gets me wired for the entire day, and I never face a crash that comes along with typical coffee. So if you want to try some coffee that will never let you down and that'll allow you to get some real work done, check out Four Sigmatic at foursigmatic.com and use code YASH to get 10% off your purchase. And as we always do on the episode, here's a short bio about Mr. Bryce Petty. Bryce Petty, who can be found on Twitter at B_Petty14 and on Instagram at Brycer09, that's with two R's, was born in Thomaston, Georgia. His family later moved to Midlothian, Texas, where he played football for Midlothian High School. As a high school quarterback, Bryce was ranked 25th in his position by Rivals.com. He went on to play collegiate football at Baylor University and backed up, some of y'all might know him, Robert Griffin III for 3 years. He went on to start for the Bears in the 2013 and 2014 seasons and led the team to back-to-back Big 12 conference titles. He finished 7th in the Heisman voting in 2013 and 10th in 2014. After being drafted in the 4th round by the New York Jets, Bryce started 7 games and played for the team for 2 seasons. In 2018, after battling injury, Bryce stepped away from professional football and now lives in the Dallas, Texas area with his wife. He currently serves as Director of Capital Markets with AMR Capital. So Baylor Nation, this episode is honestly for you. Before I graduate, I wanted to do something that would commemorate my time, and what better way than to do it with Mr. Bryce Petty himself. So this episode with Bryce Petty is a ton of fun. We dive into all sorts of random things, as we always do on the show. So we talk about the Wonderlic score. We also talk about the TCU game. So if you're a Baylor fan, you know the game where we came back from 3 touchdowns and won that one. Well, Bryce was a quarterback there, and he led that, and we discussed that on the show. But I think at the end of the day, this show is really a story of Bryce Petty. And that story is centered around his faith and the patience that he's had to learn about over the years. So I hope you all really enjoy this episode. But without further ado, here is a long-form conversation with Mr. Bryce Petty. I am in Dallas, Texas, recording this episode with Mr. Bryce Petty himself. Bryce, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for the invite. You're a hard man to get to, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so Bryce, there's so many different places where we could start, but I thought a good place to start the episode would be how we kind of got introduced, and I'll share a little bit about that. So I was in Dallas last week recording an episode with Mr. Marcus Stroud, and Marcus mentions he sees me, being all complicated with my order, and I tell him I'm in keto, and he goes, "Oh, I know someone that's also doing that, Bryce Petty." And I was like, "Wait, you're talking about quarterback Bryce Petty?" He's like, "Yeah, he's in Dallas now, working with a real estate fund." And so yeah, Bryce, so you're actually on the carnivore diet, I came to find out.
That's right. Yeah, a little step up from you. We actually did, we being me and my wife, did the keto thing probably for like 6 weeks. I mean, it wasn't long. And then through the keto community, if you will, when we were driving from New York to Miami, came across this guy that had a podcast, with this guy named Dr. Sean Baker, who I had kind of mentioned to you before, very much, carnivore advocate. So basically what that is like I said, it's a step up from keto. It's where it's only red meat. And you want it obviously from the keto perspective to be your fatty meats. So ribeyes, bacon, bison, ground beef, that kind of thing. So, so that's, we kind of go off and on, out of 3 months, it'll be like a month on there. And so I really enjoy it though.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it out myself. So I'll have to let you know how the results go.
You need to.
Yeah. I was telling you earlier, like my thought is initially that, that's got to be crazy. That's got to hurt your gut. It's got to hurt your stomach and got to mess up all your microbiome. But, I've seen some results and people that I've talked to saying that it's actually really good for you. So I'm excited to look more into that.
Yeah. See, so I couldn't spell microbiome, so I'm going to leave that to you. That's probably, where we differ and I just enjoy it. I kind of just go off of what I feel, in the sense of what makes me feel good. And so there's times now where, I'll eat carbs and I don't feel good at all. It messes with me. So it's kind of one of those things, you take out, I stopped drinking Cokes a long time ago and now I can't remember the last time I've had a Coke, and just because it makes me feel so bad when I drink it. So why in the world would I do it? If it's a donut, it's a different story. I'll go through the pain there, but so we're enjoying the carnivore and kind of how you feel on that standpoint.
Sure. So Bryce, I've, as I prep for these episodes, I do a lot of research and kind of dig into people's stories. And when I looked into your story, there was so much patience and faith involved that I really want to dive deep into that. So you go to high school in Midlothian, Texas.
That's right. Yeah.
So, growing up, how would you describe your upbringing?
Yeah. So kind of like you alluded to, very much rooted in faith, and I owe everything to my parents for that, and everything was either faith or sports. It was one of the two, for me. So my sister was very much, faith, sports, academics. She's the angel of the family. But my world revolved around sports. That's just what I love to do. And I think it was probably me and Dad were, wrestling in the house and broke a vase or something. And I think Mom was like, "All right, you're going to play football." And so I think I started. I actually think baseball was my first sport. I was like 5, and then I played football that next year, and I think one of our coaches demonstrated a tackling drill with his head down. So Dad said, "Okay, I'm not gonna let my kid be coached that head down is how you tackle." So he started coaching me in first grade, and that was a joy to have your dad coach you. And so within that, very involved in my life, very involved in sports. And then Mom was the youth minister, when we were actually there in Cabot, Arkansas. So 1st through 9th grade, I was in Cabot, or in Arkansas rather. And then we moved the second semester of my freshman year to Texas. So, so very involved in faith and community, in sports. And then, coming to Texas, it was just like, it's beautiful. Exactly. Right, exactly. So it was a beautiful relationship there, and so just got to start playing. And really, what was funny about it too was our high school in Cabot. For those of you who don't know what a wing T offense is, it's literally like you run 98% of the time. You got 3 running backs in the backfield. It's kind of built off this whole like deception, trickery kind of deal. You don't know who's getting the ball. It's the same.
Is that kind of like what the Navy and the Army do?
It's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so me being a slow white boy, I was happy to get back there and the shotgun and what we kind of did in high school and be able to throw it around a little bit. So that ended up being a really good move for us and for me. And I think that was kind of bringing at least towards where college meets up with that. Yeah.
So when I looked at your high school performance and your football profile, you were a 3-star quarterback, top 50 coming out in your position. You had offers from all these different places, and you actually decided to play for Tennessee at first with Philip
Fulmer.
Yeah. And he ended up retiring. Lane Kiffin comes in, doesn't give you a call.
Yeah.
And so you decide, hey, if I'm not wanted here, I'm going to take my talent somewhere else.
That's right. Take my talents to South Beach. Yeah. And South Beach ended up being
Waco, Texas, right?
That's right. So it was kind of crazy, man. We were an SEC family growing up, and And my cousin actually played for LSU, was on their national championship team. And, you know, being in Arkansas, it was like you kind of root for the Hogs, but all my family from Louisiana, we were just huge LSU people. And so when we kind of got on the recruiting circuit, you know, you always kind of say like, oh, I don't care, I want to scout. But at the same time, I was like, I really want to play SEC ball. And so got offered by Tennessee and Coach Fulmer and jumped on it. Was absolutely thrilled to be there. He just signed like a 7-year extension. So, you know, that
the odds
continuity.
Yeah.
I mean, the continuity was great. And just consistency to know that you're going to play for the same guy. And especially nowadays, how many people kind of jump all around. But, so anyways, dude, Coach Fulmer actually ended up getting fired. And that kind of rocked my world a little bit.
That's right. He did get fired, yeah.
And so when Coach Kiffin came in, you know, he just wanted his blonde hair, blue eyed California quarterback, and I'm ugly, lanky, and brown haired. So I didn't get that call, but it was really cool because Coach Monty Montgomery was our OC at Baylor at the time, and he was actually in my coach's door that next week and was like, I really want you to meet Coach Bryles, come down. You know, we've been there since day one. We really want you. And so I met Coach Bryles, and I just like the honesty about him, you know, and from that standpoint, he was like, listen, I got this guy called Robert Griffin. He's going to be our quarterback for a little bit.
He turned out to be okay.
He turned out to be okay. Yeah. Anytime you got a statue about you, you're pretty good. So, but yeah, so I just kind of fell in love with who Brawls was, and you know, as a player's coach is kind of a term that I think is thrown around a little bit too loosely nowadays, but he truly was a guy that really valued that coach-player relationship, and so jumped on board with that, and that was all she wrote.
Sweet. And so you come to Baylor, come to Waco, Texas, and you know, one of the best headlines I've heard about you is that you had to wait 1,786 days to play between your last start in high school to your first start in Waco, Texas. And for quarterbacks, you know, you think of a quarterback, you think of someone who's got all this confidence, maybe a little bit of an ego. That's a lot to take in. You know,
yeah.
that hurts your confidence, that hurts your ego.
Right.
You know, how are those first three to 4 years where you were just, you know, not doing much, and you actually came to Baylor and you had to take a gray shirt, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
For those who don't know what that is, you actually basically enroll in college a year later, right?
Yeah. So it's a semester later. So technically so instead of coming in the fall where, you know, I graduated in 2009. So instead of being that 2009 class, I was really in that 2010 class that started in January. So it's kind of a way to get around, numbers per se, I guess. So, and I shouldn't say get around. I mean, it's definitely legal. That sounded like it was illegal. Yeah, no, it's you just don't hear about it much. You know, most kids don't want to sit around, and that honestly was probably the worst part of that. You know, little 1,786 day stunt was that semester, that fall semester, being in Midlothian, where all your friends are out of college.
So you actually were just sitting at home.
Well, yeah. So I took, you know, so 12 hours is considered a full workload, which counts against your clock. So I actually took 11 hours at, you know, like a community building, you know, there in Midlothian, which, it was just tough. You know, I really wanted to be independent, you know, get out of the nest kind of deal. And especially when you have a scholarship waiting on you, you want to be with your guys. You want to, you know, start, you know, the next chapter in that sense. So, but yeah, that one, it was kind of cool because there was just certain stages to that. You know, it was, you know, for me, kind of maturing in that process of sorts. And the first, you know, year and a half was basically the typical college lifestyle of, you know, probably a little bit more drinking than I care to admit to, and just kind of a very empty lifestyle, if you will. And then, you know, once I kind of started, I think just I don't know if it was more spiritual maturity at that standpoint or at that point, or you know, just growth in general, but
something kicked in for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got my butt kicked. You know, and I actually met a guy by the name of Chris Womack who ended up being my, I guess, spiritual mentor. We did Bible studies every Monday night, and then we had lunch every Friday, and just from that growth, I really understood, you know, this concept of, you know, maybe what I was shown back early years with mom and dad and being rooted in church of who I was, but really what it was meant to follow Christ and putting that hope into something bigger than yourself. And that's, in a sense, what God was for me then. He was hope. I mean, he still is now, but as I'm growing in my faith and understanding really who he is and what that means in my life, back then it was all about football. So I would hear a verse and immediately translated to football, like, oh, it's going to work out. It's day 1684, but it's going to work out, that kind of thing. And so, it was a very different time, when you have kind of goals and ambitions to be on the field, and it hurts, that playing quarterback, and some of that I've always said too, there's only one out there. It's not like you can play special teams or, be second, third, like you're doing scout team, during the week, and then you sit on the sideline with a hat on and headphones if you're lucky, if they have enough, so it's a very, it's just a weird place because you just don't feel like you contribute to anything. So that was the kind of growth through that standpoint of kind of being able to understand what it means to have to wait, to be patient. I never wanted to transfer, especially nowadays with, you kids don't get what they want, so they leave. And I know that's different. Everybody's situation is different, but in essence, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. So during those first few years at Baylor, it seems like you really had a strong foundation that was built. You're right. Like, as you were mentioning, a lot of kids would have transferred in your position, but you chose to stick it out. Did that come from the foundation, or where did that really stem from? Because, when I see kids that are, even people that are my own age, right? They want to get that internship. They want to get that job. Right. They want to get that promotion. And sometimes one of the qualities I feel like people miss out on is that they are just not patient. Yeah. So where did that stem from for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I think it was a combination of a couple things. I think one being rooted, with my dad, that, when you sign dotted line on something, if you shake hands, if you give somebody your word, it needs to be seen through, to the end. And then when you have, the faith aspect, kind of coupled with that, to know that, and especially growing in my faith in that way of like knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's things that I'm going through right now that I don't exactly know or understand why, but there's something that he has that's greater for me. Because the thing is God doesn't think, within human perspective. And so we just don't understand that. And then on the football side of things, it was a process that I felt like this is going to do something for me down the road. So you have the faith part of the hope, but then you have the physical part of the process to where you actually get to grow and understand. And so when I backed up Nick,
Nick Florence.
Yeah, Nick Florence, yep. And what was that, 2012? That camp, it stunk because I was so ready. I just wanted a chance. And there was never a competition. It was always Nick's. And I didn't really understand the value of that until, later on. And so what I kind of told myself was, at the beginning, after all the sulking and why me and all this kind of stuff, I was like, man, I can go about this two different ways. I can sit there and sulk, or I can just be like, you know what, I'm going to be the best backup in the country. So I kind of took that approach, and it really ended up, I'll kind of seriousness saving me, because if you're a sour teammate, you're going to be a sour colleague, you're going to be a sour client, you're going to be a sour dad, mom. Like, that is going to translate into every aspect of your life if you learn that if you don't get what you want, you just sulk. And so that's kind of what I guess fueled me to be the best teammate I can be. And so, especially for like the listeners now, you have to understand that life's not going to go the way that you want it to go. And I learned that obviously through my experience of football. But what I did learn is, and it's true to this day too, is that nothing really ever happens the way that I want it to happen, but it always ends up being better than what I ever could imagine.
So if you were to go back and you reflect on your time at Baylor until that point where you're not the quarterback yet, you're just kind of waiting it out, you're trying to do the best you can, is there anything that you would change in that time?
I don't know, because you kind of teeter on that line of regret, right? And I think that everything that you go through in life is not meant to be. You can have instances where you're like, man, I wish I'd have done that differently. But at the same time, that situation, that choice that you made is going to propel you into the next situation to where there's going to be a choice to be made. You're either going to learn because you made the right choice or the wrong choice, what to do with that next choice, right? And I know I'm kind of being redundant here, but that's really what that was. So it's funny when people ask me that is, do you wish, like, obviously I wish that, I'd have been day one starter and freshman All-American and drafted number 1 overall and all that stuff. But that's not my story. And I think that had that had been my story, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you knowing, hey, through all that stuff that's happened, all that growth, all that learning, it's allowed me to appreciate certain situations that I go through now. And that's even transcended kind of into my marriage and, being that husband, being that brother to my, to my sister, that son to my mom and dad, all those things that happen on the field, the way that it happened, how it happened has made me who I am today. And so that's how you have to look at kind of every situation that you're thrown into.
Sure. So then 2013 comes around, you finally named the starter, you're doing really, really well. No one kind of sees this coming, and you end up doing really well that year. And then even same with 2014, right? And there's one game in particular though that I think every Baylor fan wants to know about, and that's the game against TC.
Yeah.
Right. You're down 21. There's 11 minutes to go, and you do the impossible by, like, no one's there watching the game, right? Like most of the fans have actually left. And that's probably one of the biggest regrets for all Baylor fans, even to this day. And you end up leading the team to victory.
Yeah.
So, when you reflect on that time, what do you think? What comes to your mind? And what do you like? What's your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Yeah. You know what? It's funny too, because so when I just threw interception, returns it back, and I get on the sideline, and all I can do is kind of look up. Like my body language isn't necessarily like slumped over, but it's just like, what the heck is going on here? And, but like when I kind of looked down the sideline, like no one was slumping, there was 11 minutes left. I mean, shoot, we scored half the time in 1 minute, 30 seconds anyways. And, but there was really, there was no sense of panic. There wasn't a sense of, oh man, we've lost. It was just like, hey, once we get this kickoff, let's go back to work. And it was so crazy because the next drive is, to me, what set that comeback apart from a lot of other comebacks where we ran it. I think we ran shock 6 times. And it was like the dude was getting 12, 14 yards a pop. And it was just like boom, 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 all the way down the field. And I think we scored in like a minute, like 40 seconds or something like that. And so for everything that happened before that, to immediately be rebounded by that drive, that touchdown, and then just kind of set, it was all of a sudden like this, just like the game last night, Texas Tech, Virginia. There was so many, in games, it's so crazy because there's so many momentum shifts. There's never a time, even Virginia was up 10 points at one time.
You're talking about the Final Four.
The Final Four game, yeah, the national championship game last night. And so, you can't ever allow yourself to be counted out. And I think that's what makes kind of the difference between good athletes and great athletes, or good businessmen and bad businessmen, or women, or whoever it is. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you feel like you can be counted out, you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur, because that's the whole thing about it is that the only thing you can control is your attitude and your work ethic. And we had put the work in. We were a great team. We just had some things go wrong, and that's life, So you ask kind of like, what's the takeaway of that? Is it's not necessarily the sense of like, oh, I never give up, all this kind of stuff, which is good. But at the same time, you have to understand that life is just a big roller coaster of momentum. And, that's kind of where my faith comes in, and that hope, kind of what, I was talking about earlier with how football's kind of taught me about that. But in a sense of, if you can be level-headed in every aspect or every situation that life kind of throws at you, and whatever career path you're in, and you just keep waking up and you put one foot in front of the other, and you allow God to work through you in every situation that you're in, finding the good in all situations, it's going to bode super well for you in everything that you do.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. When I look back at those 2 years that you started, that was, we look back now as Baylor fans, we say, wow, that was probably the height of our of our football dynasty at the time, right? And maybe dynasty is a strong word, but it was definitely the height of Baylor football,
Right.
And then even for you, you finished top 10 in the Heisman voting back-to-back years. But one thing that I think is really interesting is, when even if we go back a little bit more for you, even to your high school days, the guys that were in your class of quarterbacks, we're talking Matt Barkley, Geno Smith. These guys were already in the NFL, right? And you were right there with them,
Right.
And now we have the story that I want to talk about is the story of patience, right? So finally, you have the opportunity to go to the NFL, but you've already seen all these guys kind of get there, kind of surpass you almost, if you will. Right. How have you taken that during that time?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question because I never really looked at. I mean, obviously you see it, right? I mean, you have all these guys that are, whether they're coming out their junior year, Matt Barkley stayed his senior year, but there's a lot of things that kind of happen that maybe you don't consciously think of, but it's subconsciously there, And you play the what if game, right? Like, what if I could have been at USC where Matt Barkley was, and what if I could have, had the arm that Geno had, or whatever that case is. And I think that when you play the what if game, you kind of you put a cap or a ceiling on what God can do with you, because you're putting a cap on what you can do with yourself. And so the patience part was cool, because growing within that, I kind of had this, and I loved this analogy. And if you've kind of heard me talk, sometimes you've heard it before, but I had this analogy I've had this analogy that I kind of feel like was my first time to really hear God in a sense. I'm a very visual person, and so there's a lot of times where I'll kind of have a vision of sorts. But anyways, so you walk into this room and you immediately feel like you're in the presence of greatness. That there's greatness surrounding you. You have paintings all up on the wall that I'm not a big art guy, but I feel like if there's a masterpiece, it's a masterpiece. So in this vision, that there's a masterpiece. In the center of the room, there's this painter. And obviously that from walking in the room, that this painter has painted all these paintings. And you kind of walk up and it's like, it begins to kind of transform as a painting of your life. And as you turn around and kind of see or walk towards the painter in this case and look to see who his face is, in the vision it's God. And on the what's it called? Not the easel, but where he's painting on the
canvas.
Canvas, thank you. On the canvas is my life. And so what's crazy about it is in that same sense when you think about a painter and their ability to paint, I would never take the paintbrush from Michelangelo, right? Like I would just never do that. And so when it comes to my life, why in the world would I try to take the paintbrush from God and try and think that, hey, in my own plans or my own, infinite wisdom, I would have what I would think or deem as perfect life for me. And so within that thought and kind of, relating it back to patience, that was kind of the height of, for me reaching the pinnacle in my faith at that point. So I really understood that God has a plan for my life. And I don't exactly know what that is yet, but I don't want to sit here and think that I can do it better than him. And so it's funny when you ask about, the other players and especially people in my position. I just never looked at it that way. And so it's kind of helped me get to where I am now, that even now that I'm out of the league, I'm kind of starting a new venture that man, God has my painting on a canvas, and no matter where he's at in that painting, he is the author and perfecter of my life. And that's the only thing that matters at that point.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And as you kind of transitioned out of college, you decided to go to the NFL. And, people will talk about all these different combine results. But the one that I think is probably the greatest of all of those is...
my hand size?
No.
Okay. It's not that impressive.
The Wonderlic score, right? So for those that don't know what the Wonderlic test is, it's this test where it kind of almost measures your intelligence. And well, Bryce, while your hand size might be better than average, I think you scored a 31 on this test, which is actually up there with some of the top NFL players of all time. And for just to put that in perspective, it scores in the 90th percentile of intelligence. And that's something that a lot of people, I feel like we just don't talk about. When you saw that score, was that something that you already knew about, or was that surprising to you, or did classes really just set you up that well for it?
Yeah, what's funny is actually that is the first time I've heard what my Wonderlic score is.
Seriously,
swear I've never heard what it is. So it's funny that you say that. No, I don't think. And it's funny because a lot of what the Wonderlic is pressure, right? So it's how many questions? 50 questions, and you have 10 minutes to do it. And so all that is applying a time limit to the amount of questions that you can do. So you try and roll through it as fast as you can, but it's the ability to adjust. It's the ability to say under pressure, in a sense, how does your mind operate? Do you freak out? Do you hone in? Do you just do that one question at a time, which is kind of, in essence, kind of how I went into it. Was I don't care if I get through 20 questions or if I get through all 50, I'm going to go one question at a time and roll. And so, I mean, obviously you have to have, I guess, a little bit of intelligence to be able to answer the questions, but at the same time, it's all about how you adjust to pressure. So it's not as crazy. I mean, there's been plenty of guys successful that scored a 4, and there's been plenty of guys not successful that scored a perfect score. So it's, but that's funny. Yeah. I've actually never heard what I got on it.
Yeah. This is just where my hour of research comes in.
Yeah, that's really good research.
So then you get picked by the New York Jets in the 4th round, and this is it, right? This is what every athlete kind of dreams about. You get the call. So, how's that feeling for you? Was that the thing was it as exciting as you thought it would be?
Yeah, that part was tough for me, honestly. And it's kind of funny that I open up, saying that, because I had got some decent intel, I guess, that I was going to be top 50. Right. So top 50 would be
first 2 rounds. Yeah.
Yeah. First, second round. Yeah. And so, again, just like anything in life, when you are given an expectation, right, and you focus on that expectation, and you don't, it's like the Wonderlic thing, being able to adjust. But if you don't allow yourself the ability to be okay
from that,
right,
moment,
be okay from it with anything else, you're going to set yourself up for hurt. And so that, again, was kind of a growing moment in me, because I was a butthole, to be totally honest. I was not happy because you start seeing the teams that need a QB. You start seeing the teams that you think, okay, I have a decent chance of getting drafted here. And then as those rounds get, 1, 2, 3, those teams start to spread out, right? And so then it just becomes this huge weight of, wow, is this going to happen? And then the competitive comes into it as well, to where, I train with Jameis, and, this, I love this dude. And I have told him to his face, like, I felt like I was better than you, and so he goes number 1. I was out there with Marcus. I was like, man, I feel like I'm better than you. He goes out there number 2. Now that's in my mind, right? So there's a lot of things about it, but then Garrett Grayson goes, and Sean Mannion goes, and all these guys that I felt like, what in the world is going on? To where you really start or stop to enjoy the moment, and you start doing this whole what if game. You start, sulking, and so that process was hard. But in saying all that, when you hear your name called and you get the telephone call from, at that point it was Coach Bowles and Mike McCagnon and Shane Gailey and those guys, and all that stuff goes out the window. And it's like, man, you just see yourself as a 6-year-old kid playing football, knowing that, man, I just hope I play in the NFL one day. And you get that call, and that dream becomes a reality. It's the greatest feeling in the world. And so I absolutely loved it. It was such a cool moment in my life.
Yeah, you described it as, this fraternity almost when we were having lunch earlier. And I thought that was a great way to put it. So you get into the fraternity, right? And then you had a pretty decent NFL career. So how would you describe your time in the NFL?
Yeah, I've actually never been asked that, partly because not many people know that it's over. But I don't know. I think a lot of me wanted to be, the competitive side of me wanted to be able to say that it was a lot better than it was. I got 6-7 games to start, and honestly, it just didn't end up the way I saw it. But again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like, very rarely in life does it ever go the way I want it to go, but it always ends up better. And so I will never sit here and say that I regret those. Like, they were the greatest 7 games ever, regardless of, we had one win in San Fran, which was, the highlight of the NFL career. It was awesome. But then even to lows to where, we had a chance to beat San Diego at home, and I chunked my ball, really, in essence, and I know that's kind of a golfer term, but I short stroked it and kind of had practiced that ball, several times that week. And so it's just amazing what, playing sports and doing it competitively show you about yourself. And so I loved that chapter of my life playing in the NFL, and am super excited for the next chapter.
Yeah. And so what most people might not know about you now is that, you quote unquote retired, which we were joking about earlier, because there's no such thing as retirement anymore. We're talking about how Brett Favre kind of got the best of the NFL.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Did away with the term. But so you stepped away from the game in January, and here you are immediately working for AMR Capital.
AMR, yep.
A real estate fund out of Dallas.
Yep.
And, just from the conversations we had, you have learned so much over the past 4 years. And I just can't imagine, what those 4 months have been like. So, how has that transition been for you?
Yeah. You know what? It's been such a blessing, man. And I absolutely love what I'm doing now. And I kind of always prayed that whenever that transition happened, that I would be okay, that I would have peace with it. And not only do I have peace with where I'm at right now, I have joy. I wake up every day very joyful of where I'm at. And, the relationships and the networking aspect of the business world is so intriguing to me, because it's very genuine, at least down south. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is everywhere. The only place I know is Dallas, but, I'm really having a fun time learning anything and everything I can about real estate, learning anything I can about, what that entails, from commercial real estate to retail to multifamily to all the facets of real estate that there is. There's so many smart people. And like I told you earlier, like, if I'm the smartest in the room, I need to find a new room, which I know for a fact I'll be the dumbest in the room for a while. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the process of learning this and just getting out there and being able to build off of what I've learned from football and life before this to kind of transition or translate to the business world and see where God uses me and takes me from there. Yeah. And
I'm touching on that last point. I was going to ask you about that because, being a quarterback is a very special position, right? You are the only one on the field. You kind of have to survey a lot of different factors at once, and multitask, which anyone that studies the brain knows you can't multitask, right? So you're doing the impossible, basically. How have you been able to translate what you learn on the field to the finance world that you're in now?
Yeah, I think it,
and maybe it's the intangible, right? Maybe it's part of being a leader and being personable, and maybe it's that part.
Right. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think that there's a certain aspect of when you're a quarterback, you're just kind of told to lead. And there's a part of that that's true, but at the same time, you have to earn leadership. That's what they always say. You can't just go out there and, because I'm a quarterback, I lead people. You have to earn that aspect. So it's the same way with, especially when you're talking about, to a potential investor or just growing your network. You have to earn those stripes. And that's the part that I, truly enjoy. But, being able to, for me, in a sense, grow the culture and establish, from my world could be a lot different than yours, right? You're about to be in med school. And so your world is your classroom, right? My world is this meeting or that coffee meeting or that lunch meeting. And so to be able to kind of take my upbeat, positive, very faith-based, I guess, characteristics and be able to implement those in every meeting that I have, and not go into things with an angle or an agenda, but just to grow in, this is going to help me personally. If it helps me professionally, great, but I'm going to learn something, personally out of this meeting, and what I want to try and do, or to how to give back, I guess, is what I learned in the football world, which is that if you treat people like people, that typically everything works out pretty well. And so I've very, very much valued servant leadership on the field. Like, I would do something, for you before I would ever ask you to do something for me. And I really liked, to be able to transition that into the business world. I think it's just kind of who I am, or hopefully people see that.
Yeah. And I think just from my interactions with you, and we can probably end on this note, I've definitely seen that from you. We had a little bit of a scheduling conflict earlier, and I called you. And you pick up the phone and you say, hey, Yash, I said, how are you doing? And he goes, yeah, I'm doing great. I woke up today and I'm breathing some air and all is well. And I went, well, first of all, I hope he knows that he's late, but I'm glad we worked through that. Can't believe you put this on podcast. Yeah, but just the fact that, you were so upbeat and positive, and that was the first thing you mentioned to me, that says a lot about you. And, as we kind of talked about your story of patience and faith and just being and showing that through your everyday actions, I definitely see it. So Bryce, I'm excited to see where your life after football takes you. I know Dallas is going to be a fun time, and this is going to be exciting. So, but I really do appreciate you being on the show. So thank you, Bryce.
Well, Yash, I appreciate that. Like I said, the opportunity, beforehand, and just thinking of me, and especially for the viewers out there. I think that there's such a cool moment when you understand that your testimony is important, that who you are as a person is important to everybody that you impact. And so for, no matter if it's on the football field or in the business world, you control that world. Not in a sense of like a tyrant by any means, but the way that you approach, those meetings and people in general will always benefit you if you, have that, like, I guess servant mindset, and really enjoy just the nuts and bolts of what a relationship actually is, instead of, putting agenda first. So, I really appreciate being able to talk and kind of give my 2 cents, and hopefully some people got some things out of it, and I'd love to do this again. So thank you very much.
Glad to have you on, Bryce.
Yes, sir.
If you like what you heard on the Yash and Company podcast, go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Yash and Company. If you check out our website at yashandco.com, we'll actually mail you a free sticker if you subscribe. But until next Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, this is Yash signing out.